You know, because my stuff, you know, it is what it is. You know, it's not trying to be everything for everybody. And so when you are what you are, you know, there's some people, you know, that aren't going to like it. And they shouldn't like it. Of course they would never like it, you know. And, you know, always hoping that, like, you know, you make a movie and, you know, it's great you get this acceptance right now. But, you know, maybe another film I'll do won't get acceptance. But 20 years from now, people will appreciate it. So that's the great thing about film is the fact that, like, you know, it never dies.
Quentin Tarantino really kind of changed the game. Independent filmmaking, but for Hollywood filmmaking more generally.
I feel like anybody who making their way into movies, like maybe discovering the movies for the first time, Tarantino is the place they go to look and feel and sound cool.
Tarantino-esque is now a way to describe a film and shows the impact he's had on filmmaking and genre.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Quentin Tarantino again found his way to Hollywood quite early on, coming from a sort of nearly a film school background, although that's not quite how Tarantino really sort of came to discover movies.
I only lived the first couple years of my life, for the most part, in Tennessee. The rest of it, I lived in Southern California. And I lived more in the East LA area when I was like a little boy, like Alhambra, Montebello area. But my very young parents would come up every once in a while on double dates with another couple friend of theirs to Hollywood, to this theater in particular, to see things. And where they could have just dropped me off with my grandmother or something, they took me along. So the first time I was at this theater was 1969, when I was 7 years old, and it was like a Sunday afternoon, and they took me to a trip to Hollywood, and I saw Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid at the Grauman's Chinese.
Quite a sort of didactic, idiosyncratic kind of upbringing in his own way. But from very early on, it was very clear that sort of movie culture and stuff was embedded in his psyche, really.
I was really struck by something that Tarantino had said about his film watching experience, that he always felt like he wasn't watching what everyone else was watching. Like he wasn't involved in the conversations about what's the new great movie coming out.
And I would go see the first show, first day, all right? And no one could go with me. I didn't want anyone else to, it was too, it was like a religious experience. No one, anyone should, you know, I didn't care what anyone thought, all right?
He was having this, like, weird solo exploration, you know, partially to do with working in a video rental store. I think he was just, like, burrowing away and just, like, consuming all of this culture in some sort of, like, internal cavern of his.
Until I became a director, it was the best job I'd ever had. And I ended up working there for like 5 years. Well, this is where the world-famous video archives was.
And this is where it is now. So why don't we go inside and take a look?
I've always wondered if that's the thing that separated him from a lot of other directors of the era, is that there was no sense of canon to him. And although, he's very appreciative of the very established greats, and so much of his work is indebted to the French New Wave, at the same time, there's something a little bit like off-kilter about it, and a little bit more like Quilt-like about how he's just grabbing at anything.
Tarantino referenced films from almost every different age in Hollywood. He was that well versed in Hollywood's history. He knew all the films from the past, but he wanted to mix these up into a collage that created his own template, and that's exactly what he did. Independent cinema really took off in the second half of the 1980s in America, and it was aided by a couple of things. One was the proliferation of film festivals, and film festivals that very quickly acquired a fame and notoriety, a kind of access point for young filmmakers who, until that point, really didn't have many places to show their films. So the likes of Sundance, later South by Southwest, New York as well, film festivals like that gave a chance for independent filmmakers to come along and show their movies, really kind of gave an impetus to filmmakers who were making films for very little money indeed at the time, but didn't have a showcase. And this provided them with a showcase for the first time.
Well, it's funny because I always I'm a big supporter of the Sundance workshop. Because not the festival so much. Nothing against the festival. All right, the festival really introduced me, but I'm saying the workshop that they do there is really important.
It was that festival circuit that helped break, I guess, independent-minded films that crossed over into the mainstream. Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies and Videotape, I guess, at the end of the 1980s is pretty key in that. A film that sort of produced a bidding war at many of the film festivals, and of course later would make Soderbergh a big mainstream filmmaker. And the same would happen for Tarantino with Reservoir Dogs to an extent. That went round the festival circuits, and word of mouth made it become the hit and be taken up by the distributors and mainstream studios.
And I went up there with Reservoir Dogs and did a bunch of scenes, on video, just tryout scenes and everything, and it taught me a lot. It was really wonderful. So I'm a big supporter of what they do.
And the indie scene had opened the way for people to begin to sort of, appear on the scene without an awful lot of credentials, but with quite a lot of bravado, which Tarantino had an enormous amount of.
What? To the festival, with a movie? Well, I don't know. I'm nothing against them. It's just I don't. Thank you very much. Okay, just up your head.
You know Roger Daltrey with the microphone.
Yeah, tell me about it. It depends, maybe someday. Actually, to tell you the truth, my biggest problem with the Sundance Film Festival is I don't like the theaters that they have at Park City. All right, I had so many problems when I was showing Reservoir Dogs. Their theaters suck, man. They basically use old moose lodges, to show the films and stuff. Great festival, just get the theaters a little better.
Things that I think he benefited from was that, particularly at Miramax, they were keen. Miramax Pictures were very keen at that period in the late 80s and early 90s to cultivate young filmmakers and bring them into the scene. And Miramax already had that reputation of being partly an independent film company, so they quite like cutting-edge movies, but also having a relationship with the majors, a major minor company as it became known. And I think that relationship really helped Tarantino from the off. The relationship, of course, became problematic in time for all sorts of reasons. But in its first incarnation, I think without a company like Miramax, it's hard to know whether Tarantino, first time out anyway, would have got the backing to make a film like Reservoir Dogs.
But I never watched movies. I didn't really watch TV. And the first thing I said to my dad, I was like, oh, you know, I should watch movies right now. I'm thinking about acting. And he goes, here, watch this. And the first movie he gave me was Reservoir Dogs. And I watched it 7 times that week. and I was so transfixed with it because, you know, if you want to talk about his style, you have a bunch of actors in a room together, the same exact room, wearing the exact same clothes. And you allow the actors to tell the story, to get you completely sucked in.
You know what this is? It's the world's smallest violin playing just for the waitresses.
Reservoir Dogs was such a sensation when it came out, and it became this sort of like promise of what you could achieve at the Sundance Film Festival. And I think it's sort of why maybe still today the Sundance Film Festival has this like veneer of cool around it, because it's like maybe you could be the next Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere. People were, who is this person? This former video store clerk that has sort of made this really dense, talky, dark, dirty, funny, gritty film that is completely arresting from the very first moment and takes you on a ride that you find yourself holding your breath whilst watching.
And his arrival felt so immediate and complete, and everyone was a little gobsmacked how this guy came out of nowhere and made this tonally revolutionary film that just every door just like sort of flung open, and suddenly Tarantino was just kind of on a sprint that he's never really slowed down from.
In Cannes during festival time, what else can a self-respecting busker play but film music? You may recognize it, the theme from The Godfather. The people of Cannes, the Cannois, continue to walk their dogs, but shush, their surroundings are changing. The place has become one extended advertising hoarding. The festival is about to begin, buying, selling, pitching, talking movies, and if you're lucky, seeing a few. For a geeky former video store worker from Knoxville, Tennessee, it doesn't get much better than this.
But I had a dream. My dream was to go to Cannes. Not go with a movie to Cannes, to just go to Cannes, all right? That would have been a dream come true, all right? And then my dreams have just kept moving up. Then it was like a dream to go to Cannes with my movie.
Next dream was to win the Palme d'Or, which I did in '94 when I came here with Pulp Fiction.
There's something about the iconography in Pulp Fiction that was instantly classic. And I mean, I remember watching Pulp Fiction for the first time, and I came to it already with all of these images embedded in my head, all of these speeches, the dancing, the music. It's something that I think like suddenly made directors kind of want to have that identity, like that very cool like pop culture identity to them. And if you look at a lot of people who are popular now, even like a figure like Edgar Wright, I think there's that Tarantino element to them of that. They're creating their own brand within the movie. And that's why you have the Tarantino universe with the cigarettes, with repeated characters, with characters from different movies being related to each other. It's sort of a self-mythologizing act, which I think really probably kicked off in earnest in Pulp Fiction.
You could see that Pierre did truly love the mademoiselle. And now the young monsieur and madame have rung the chapel bell.
I love that sort of segmented style and different stories converging. The soundtrack's amazing. And yeah, just it feels like it's Tarantino at the height of his powers, having learned on the films that came before and making exactly the film he wants in that.
Could you tell us, this is a real different kind of role for you. How do you think it's going to affect your career?
Oh, I hope in a good way. Change is good.
Who do you think's gonna like this movie?
Everybody, I hope.
What's it like working with Quentin Tarantino?
It was absolutely my best experience as far as that's concerned.
And what? Thank you.
Oh, a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris.
They don't call it a quarter pounder with cheese?
Oh man, they got the metric system. They wouldn't know what the fuck a quarter pounder is.
And what do they call it?
They call it Royale with cheese.
Royale with cheese.
That's right.
What do they call a Big Mac?
Big Mac's a Big Mac, but they call it Le Big Mac.
Le Big Mac. wait. I'll do it this way. Yes.
HBO, can you tell us what it's like to work with Quentin Tarantino?
A lot of fun.
Yeah?
Quite a bit of fun.
Who do you think's gonna like this movie?
Everybody.
Is it gonna offend anybody?
No, not at all. Actually, the movie's a lot of fun. It's funny, it's thrilling, it's exciting. It's a real feel-good kind of film.
Samuel L. Jackson, I mean, had obviously been working for a while and had been a great actor, but I think there's something about the Jackson-Tarantino collaborations that really like morphed him into this larger-than-life figure, and I would really argue shaped the rest of his career.
Like me, I was very, very proud the day I got mine. I'm sure Quentin's extremely proud that he's getting this today. And I know what it means to him because of what he thinks and how he reveres this business and the art of filmmaking. There aren't a lot of people in this business who still look at filmmaking the way Quentin does and the purity of what it is and what it should be and what it means to you people who pay your money to watch the films. He's all about making films that make you happy because we went to the movies to be happy when we were kids and as we grew up, and we still do. And we think that film should entertain you. If you want to learn something, watch a documentary or read a book. And Quentin is all about the business of movies as entertainment. And, you know, he sneaks a message in there, but he's going to entertain you while he gives it to you. This is an amazing, amazing day for a kid from Knoxville, Tennessee, to become a name on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Oh my God. Who would have thought?
Would Samuel L. Jackson have become Nick Fury? Would he have been fighting snakes on a plane? Like, there's so much of a sort of like a symbolic coolness to him now that all comes down to how naturally he could work with Tarantino's dialogue. Because that's the really tricky thing, is that it's so affected and it has its own logic to it. And actors either get it or they don't. And Samuel L. Jackson, like, he got it the most out of them all.
Well, it's always great to be on a Tarantino set. He brings a lot of enthusiasm to the cast, the crew, to the neighborhoods that we're working in, because it was his neighborhood, and he was anxious to show us, you know, this is where I grew up. This is Carson. This is the Del Amo Mall. So it was great, you know, just kind of being around and being fun. And he still listens to the stuff, laughs out loud in the middle of a take, and you have to start over. So it's just a joy, you know, to be there. And the fun that we have consequently transfers, I think, to the screen. So when you watch it, you're seeing people who are really enjoying being themselves and having a great time.
My favorite Tarantino movie is probably actually Jackie Brown. Because I think as much as I admire what that sort of postmodernist filmmaking and the boldness of it has done for the wider landscape, I actually enjoy it when he slows down a little.
Well, the target audience, well, it's like, I hope, you know, all my fans come, and that's a lot of people, all right? I like to bring some new fans in, all right, which is like a lot of older people that maybe Pulp Fiction they were kind of scared by Pulp Fiction. This is a much more mature movie. I mean, everybody in the movie is of an older age. It's like, you know, Pam is in her 40s, and Robert Forster is in his 50s, and Sam Jack, you know, it's like, it's an older movie about older people, and, you know, coming to like the last chance in their lives, you know, to do something special. And so I think it has a lot to offer for that.
It's just a little bit more muted, and there's a little bit more tenderness towards the characters. And I think that's partially because it's such a love letter to who Pam Grier is and her star power and her magnitude, that the movie sort of revolves around her and molds around her. And it just, yeah, there's just that little extra softness to it that I really, really like.
Pretty?
Mm-hmm.
Who is this?
The Delphonics.
He's very good at bringing back actors who maybe have gone away a little bit or you haven't heard of, and bringing to the fore and shining a light on their immense talent.
I remember actors that are terrific, all right? And in a town where after 5 years you fall off this list and move down to that list, my list goes all the way around the block and back again, all right? And I just remember good actors, and I like to give good actors a shot and everything. Now, if they end up like having a major career revival, that's great, and it couldn't happen to better people. I'm just casting good actors.
I think one of the things that was great about Tarantino, but also one of the things that I guess people spotted about him a little bit as well, is that the tone and style of his kind of cinema even came through in the scripts that he didn't direct in the 1990s.
So Tarantino's screenwriting projects are fascinating, actually, because it's the extent to which his voice extends beyond his like directorial hand. So I think True Romance, yeah, that really feels like a Tarantino movie.
Brilliant. You're a big co-star. How was making this movie? Any challenges for you?
Yeah, there's a million, but I can't just, rattle them off.
Saying my very wordy dialogue that's very convoluted, doesn't make any sense.
That was not the problem.
And I feel really goofy saying this after only knowing you one night. And me being a call girl and all. But I think I love you.
That you wrote?
Yeah, this is my very first screenplay I wrote. I wrote this when I was 25 years old.
So do you have different feelings about it now than you did when you wrote it?
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, but not like, it's not worse or better kind of thing. It's just like, it's like looking at my childhood. So I don't know how to describe it. It's like you thinking back on your college days or something. That's exactly what it's like. It's like, wow, gosh, geez. It was like so personal at that time. And now it's just like this thing in that was so personal, that I grew. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all, but it's when I saw it for the first time, I was like, God, this is like my life. None of that stuff ever happened to me, but it was like, this is like my life done as a big movie. It was just nutty. It was crazy. And she was my dream girl.
I was going to say, do you find it, because your films have been seen as kind of male, is it hard to write women's dialogue for you?
Wait, see, that was a bad rap that got on me for Dogs, just because all the guys, the whole movie was guys. I actually think like the best characters I've ever written have been my female characters. And she's... I gotta tell you something about her. Somebody asked me who I thought said my lines like the way they were in my head. And I gotta tell you, I was like, oh, okay, well, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this person, that person. And I was never mentioning Patty. And they go, well, what about Patricia? Did you like her as Alabama? I go, look, Patty doesn't even count. Because she is so much the character that sometimes she says the way it was in my head, and sometimes she doesn't. And when she doesn't, she's right.
That's a compliment.
And then you have like Natural Born Killers, where I think so much of that script was changed that it starts to like corrupt it a little bit.
Feel vindicated now that you're leaving Natural Born Killers apparently in the dust?
No. Hopefully I'm much too big to like have that kind of petty crap and everything, It's like there's been a lot of stuff said, but oddly enough, right now, it doesn't matter. Natural Born Killers come out. It's done when it's done. The people who like it. The people who don't like it, don't like it. The people who like my thing like it. The people who don't like it, don't like it. And it's just, at the end of the day now, Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers is the Natural Born Killers. That's the one you all saw. That's the one that America saw and everything. And mine is just like a memory, So, God bless him.
Much as Tarantino disowned both those scripts, really, in both films, actually they have strong elements of Tarantino within them. Not simply because they were controversial in certain ways, particularly Stone's film, but that there is just a feeling about them. There is just a sort of style about them and a persuasion about them that really has his fingerprints all over it. There are lots of things you can say that you might not like about Natural Born Killers, for example, and it's not an easy film to watch in certain ways. But in many ways, Natural Born Killers was, in certain ways, the 1990s example of what Bonnie and Clyde had been in the late 1960s. It was a film that was trying and prepared to change the rules of the game in terms of, I guess, the graphic nature of what was being presented on screen, but also cinematically too. Stone had already begun to experiment with a different kind of pseudo-documentary style, fast edits, cuts, using different kind of cameras, 8mm, 16mm, black and white, you name it. He threw those all into the mix. And in a way, although he's more admired for films, I guess, like JFK and Platoon and Born on the 4th of July, that are more traditionally his subject matter, Natural Born Killers does have a lot of those elements to it. And in some ways, it very much pulls together a lot of Tarantino's style. And arguably a style that Tarantino, for a while, perhaps himself wondered about.
Where am I? Anybody tries to fuck up our escape, I will make it my life's mission. The Butwan McCluskey Adam Commission.
So it's sort of interesting the ways in which his voice carries in other people's hands. I think people will really, I guess, conceptualize of Tarantino in place and in time, because for me already at this point that we're at, like Tarantino is 1990s cinema to me. Like he's the height of what the 1990s were. So I don't know if he'll just be forever attached to that decade, even though he's done like great and really acclaimed work beyond that. I wonder whether that's just ultimately going to be his legacy.
I think it was clear from Pulp Fiction onwards that an actress like Uma Thurman was a perfect fit for Tarantino's style and his way of characterization in his films. And so it's no surprise really that, having appeared in Pulp Fiction, that he wanted Thurman to be a star in her own right of one of his films. She was really the actress who became the sort of conduit, a kind of muse in a way, for Tarantino through the 90s and the early 2000s. So it really not a surprise that Tarantino wanted to cast her in Kill Bill. And at the time, she was unable to take up the part. She was pregnant, and he had to wait for production to start on that, taking him into the early 2000s.
Uma's gonna have to do all this training, all right, in this film and everything, like samurai sword fighting and, you know, all this stuff, all right. And she's got to learn all this. She's got to learn how to roller skate and, you know, do all this roller derby stuff. And she's gonna have to learn how to fly. I don't know how we're gonna. I don't know the teacher we're gonna get to do that, because no one's quite done that before. But we're gonna do it. I mean, no wires, man. None of this crouching tiger hidden meaning. No. It's gonna be Uma flying through the air, just killing people for real. None of this Hollywood BS. People are gonna die.
You can take the reality TV a step further,
All right. Exactly.
That sounds brilliant. Does anyone know
Film
this?
Rio no. Better not to tell them right away. All right. They'll be less likely to do the job. All right. But then after they're dead, and it's art, what can they say?
Not a surprise at all, I think, that Thurman became this sort of magnetic presence in Tarantino's films and an important kind of cog in the machinery of his filmmaking that is the distinction, really, the separation between his 90s films and what he was becoming concerned with and the films he was looking to make in the early 2000s.
asking for more bass, I'm asking for blood.
And it is typically violent. Meeting the media today, the 40-year-old director once more defended his taste for gore.
This is definitely taking place not on planet Earth. And actually just using a lot of like Japanese filmic influences where it's a standard staple in Japanese cinema to cut somebody's arm off and have them have water hoses for veins.
Uma Thurman, definitely after Pulp Fiction, was considered like the Tarantino muse. And they had developed Kill Bill together, but I think so much of that is now complicated by what Uma Thurman has said about her experiences working on that film. There was a stunt in Kill Bill of the bride driving a car like very, very fast. And Uma Thurman looked at this very kind of unsafe, shoddily put together car and said, I shouldn't be doing this stunt. Quite obviously it should be the stunt woman. And Tarantino said, no, like, do it. We want to see you in the car driving fast. And, you know, as you might have guessed, the car crashed. And Uma Thurman sustained injuries that she's still dealing with today. And it's also been kind of an emotional burden that she's had to carry with today of, you know, why was she put in that position? Tarantino has apologized, but I don't think Uma Thurman has ever felt like it was really enough, because there was such a violation of trust that happened there. You know, as much as we like to think of Quentin Tarantino as being this sort of like cinematic rebel, it's like these are the instances in which we go, well, right, cinematic rebel to what degree? Like, there is a line that you cross where you become reckless. And I think that is the conversation that we need to have whenever we're talking about Quentin Tarantino.
It is surprising that Tarantino was allegedly so adamant about wanting Thurman to do the stunt, considering the fact that her stunt double, Zoe Bell, had stood in for the actress in some of the most dangerous action set pieces during the making of Kill Bill. And in a way, Zoe Bell would go on to become a secondary muse for Tarantino, in fact. After her work impressed him so much, during Kill Bill, he would go on to give her a starring role, playing herself in his next film, Death Proof.
No, it's like there is nobody that could actually pull off the daredevilish dare-doings that she does in this movie and then still say my dialogue, which is so not a hard task. She was like, get me on the hood of that car. Enough of your damn dialogue. That I'm familiar with. This rhyming, all this stuff I gotta learn. Oh my God. You want me to sing?
No, you don't want me to sing.
And she nailed it. She's the bomb. We were going for it, but it wasn't sexy. It was tough. The day we actually got her off the hood of the car was a very, very great day.
So when you offered the studios to say, hey, let's do a double feature, were they jumping on the idea, or were they like saying, what the fuck are you talking about?
No. It's like only recently that people are like, you know, maybe this is kind of risky. Then they couldn't have been happier.
Now, how is it working with Robert? I mean, did you step on each other's toes, or was it?
No, he's my best friend. It's so much fun working with him. And this is our 6th collaboration. This is our most intense collaboration. But, you know, we've done this before, and so it's great working with your best friend. Half the reason of doing the movie was, you know, knowing that I was going to have 6 months to hang out with him. So that was great.
Death Proof, really was probably Tarantino's most commercially disappointing film. It wasn't helped by the fact that it played alongside his friend and compatriot Robert Rodriguez's Planet Terror in theatres. It was part of this grindhouse double feature.
Audiences loved that, you know, the sort of like exploitation throwback of their movies up to a point. And Grindhouse, I guess, was that point, because suddenly, you know, they were here replicating the actual presentation of these movies, doing a double bill of 2 films with an intermission with trailers in.
I had an idea for a double feature, and I took it to Quentin, and he said, oh, we got to call it Grindhouse. We got to put fake trailers. And, you know, we just started feeding off each other. That was 2 years ago. And this whole thing blew up after that.
But I think audiences were very firm about the fact that they wanted like a modern interpretation of that. They didn't want the real thing. And that's why ultimately Death Proof did not do well.
Because of how you feel about your work, that must have been really hard to take. You have always just had hits.
Yeah, I was depressed. I was definitely disappointed. I was definitely depressed, and I had to get over it. I actually called some friends, filmmakers, who I respected and who've been up and down. And a couple of things that they told me was there was a nice thing, solace to hear, was the fact, well, one, it's not over yet. I mean, that's just America. Your movies do well all over the world, and so it's game ain't over yet. But the other thing about it is also, you can, that up and down thing, that Black Monday thing, along with, Happy Monday, that's the game.
Yeah.
That's the ride in Hollywood. And you can say that I haven't fully had the ride until now. And I actually had a director point out to me, he goes, it's hard right now, but you'll get over it. And the movie hasn't changed. The movie's the movie. It ain't going nowhere. But 2 is, the one thing about it, your next success is going to be all the sweeter because you've experienced what it's like to not have one.
The disappointment of Death Proof doesn't deter Tarantino. He's still got a big ambition to make a perfect 10 movies in his mind. In fact, it's only 2 years later before Tarantino would return to form. In 2009, he brought his World War II epic film Inglourious Basterds to screens. The story of Inglourious Basterds actually begins back in 1998. Tarantino began writing the film after Jackie Brown, and it was initially intended to be his follow-up.
Well, I came up with the idea about 10 years ago, and I came up with a lot of the characters and came up with a couple of the early scenes, but I had a different storyline in mind, and that was just ended up being too big. It wasn't a movie. It might have been a mini-series, but it wasn't a movie. And so I put it aside and did Kill Bill and did some other things, and when I came back to it, I realized that story was just too big, so I moved it aside and came up with a different story so I could actually make it a movie. And that's the thing, but I knew some of the stuff I had written and some of the characters I'd come up with were some of the best I ever had, so I knew I had to finish it one day.
So with 10 years of writing and development, perhaps no wonder then that Inglourious Basterds is one of Tarantino's most well-received films. It was 10 years where he got to think a great deal about how he'd make and produce that film and in what kind of way he'd bring it to the screen. One of the breakout performances, of course, comes from Christoph Waltz, a German actor who, up until that point, was barely known within Hollywood. But he turned out to be the perfect actor for the villainous role of Hans Lander, a role that had proved pretty impossible for Tarantino to cast.
Yeah. Well, the situation was this, I realized I was writing a pretty impressive character fairly early on when I was still dealing with pen and paper when it came to Colonel Hans Landa. And one of the things about the character is the fact that he's a linguistic genius. It is just simply one of the aspects about the character. And I knew that whatever actor I cast to play this has to be as much of a linguistic genius as Londa is, or else he would never come off the page. He would be trapped on the page. An actor could do the best job they could have, they could try, but if they just didn't have that in as part of their character, it just wouldn't work. He would never be what he was on the page. And I can just tell you the day that Christoph came, walked in the room, sat down, and read 2 scenes, I remember thinking, and Lawrence was sitting right next to me, go, we're making a movie.
I'm going to switch back to French now, and I want you to follow my masquerade set clear. This. Monsieur Lapadite, je vous remercie pour le lait, pour votre hospitalité.
You know, I mean, it's funny. People have come up to me a lot, and they've asked me, like, is it a fairy tale? Is it a Jewish wish fulfillment fantasy, or just a wish fulfillment fantasy anyway? And, well, there are aspects of that, all right? But to me, more than anything else is, it's, you know, exactly the way I look at it is this, is my characters changed the outcome of the war. Now, that didn't happen because my characters didn't exist. But if they had have existed, if there had have been a Friedrich Zoller who did what he did, Goebbels very well might have made a movie about him, because he did make a movie in the vein of this or at that time of the war. And if that had happened, everything that happens later in the movie is plausible. All right? And so that's kind of where I'm coming from on it.
Inglourious Basterds provided a newfound interest for Tarantino to revise history through cinema, and that was what he further explored in his next film, Django Unchained.
The question of why did Quentin Tarantino make these historical films and then choose to make them about victims of history turning around and fighting back, and having this one incident, this one action that like solves the problem, or like is either a form of revenge or like changes the course of history for the better.
I've always wanted to explore slavery, but I guess the reason that actually made me put pen to paper was to give Black American males a Western hero, give them a cool folkloric hero that could actually be empowering and actually pay back blood for blood.
Why are you so sure that there's no link between enjoying movie violence and enjoying real violence?
I'm going to tell you why I'm so sure. Do not ask me a question like that. I'm not biting. I refuse your question.
Why?
Because I refuse your question. I'm not your slave and you're not my master. You can't make me dance to your tune. I'm not a monkey.
I can't make you answer anything. I'm asking you interesting questions.
And I'm saying I refuse.
Okay. Well, no, I was just asking you why. That's fine. But you see, Jamie Foxx has said we can't turn our back and say that violence in films.
Well, then you should talk to Jamie Foxx.
Then
you should talk to Jamie Foxx about that. And I think he's actually here, so you can.
I'd love to, but I mean, you know, it's interesting that you have a different view, and I'm just trying to explore that.
Yeah, and I don't want to.
I think Quentin Tarantino is probably just sick about having to justify the use of violence in his movies, because he's hardly the only person to do it, and it is such a strange cultural phenomenon that so much of the media, journalists, like gravitated around this one guy and said, like, he is the violence and he is the reason that there is violence in America.
The reason I don't want to talk about it is I've said everything I have to say about it. If anyone cares what I have to say about it, they can Google me and they can look for 20 years what I have to say about it. I haven't changed my opinion one iota.
I don't think there's anything about Tarantino's movies that are particular or that are unique in terms of how they display violence. The violence in them is so over the top and so grandiose that I actually think it's less harmful than a lot of the action movies we get today, which portray death in such a casual and sort of like careless fashion. At least Quentin Tarantino, when he shows somebody dying, he's like showing somebody dying.
Yeah, don't drop the fucking thing, all right? I've just had the sights fixed, and they're perfect.
That's good enough.
I knew I was writing a Western, and I knew I was writing a Agatha Christie-esque locked room mystery at the same time. Both of those things I was consciously trying to put together.
The script for The Hateful Eight being leaked, I think, sort of only made Tarantino more gloriously stubborn about The Hateful Eight.
And so all of a sudden some agents had gotten it and were talking, and then all of a sudden a website put the script online so anybody could read it. And I reacted really badly to it.
Because when they leaked, he said, I'm not going to do it. That's it. You've ruined it. You've ruined the party for everybody. And then we had to go through the whole cycle of everyone going, no, Quentin, we still really want to see the movie. And he's like, okay, but I'm going to shoot it so that it's screening on 70 millimeters and it's going to be a roadshow presentation with the intermission and the prologue and all this beautiful music around it. That was just so unusual and it was so old-fashioned.
The film, when it was finally released, really represented a return to the beginnings of Tarantino's career. In a way, The Hateful Eight, I guess it could be described as a spiritual successor to Reservoir Dogs, considering the fact that it places all of the antagonists and protagonists, for the most part, in one room, with Tarantino placing them in a similar whodunit situation.
Reservoir Dogs was very, very much influenced by John Carpenter's The Thing. So if I'm doing a Western Reservoir Dogs, it's going to suggest a Western Thing, because I think the three movies have a symbiotic relationship.
So, how you doing, Black Major?
I ain't in the mood, Chris Mannix. Leave me be from your horse shit.
The other thing I like to believe about Tarantino, I think, is that his filmmaking also works in a kind of linear arc. That as he's gone on, he's matured and developed and evolved over a long period of time.
Quentin.
So I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the film I most admire. I like most of it, and I certainly admire it as a film. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think, is a brilliant reimagining of LA, of film making, of the studios, of that time and place in the late 1960s, in a way that I've almost not seen on screen for a very, very long time.
I really consider Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to be almost a movie about Quentin Tarantino, because you have these two guys, the actor and the stuntman, who have reached a point in their career where they don't feel relevant anymore. And I don't want to say that that's where Quentin Tarantino is in his career, but I feel like every artist, when they've started out so explosively, making something like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, they're gonna have a point in their career where they go, where do I fit in? What is my place in all of this? Am I washed up? Does Hollywood belong to all these young people now?
Bunch of goddamn fucking hippies.
Why, for your 10th film, are you choosing to also have a critic as a main character?
No, well, that's a long story. I can't tell you guys until you see the movie, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be surprised in some ways, should you, that Quentin Tarantino, 10 films in, should decide he's going to make a film about a movie critic. You know, what a surprise that might be in many ways. But I think, again, in talking about the evolution of Tarantino's filmmaking, you know, what I surmise from that is that this is a metaphor for a whole lot of other things that are going on. So in that respect, I think it's probably not such a great surprise that Tarantino should choose to make a film about somebody who at that point was very, very famous. Pauline Kael was a hugely influential film critic. She wasn't alone, but she was a kind of spectacular example of the way in which the movie critic could almost move the dial on Hollywood's sense of the kind of films that it should be making and what could prove successful or otherwise. She was that influential and important by the 1970s. Probably not a surprise that his last couple of films have returned him to Hollywood as a subject matter, filmmaking as a subject matter. That seems very pertinent in many ways. Tarantino is a filmmaker's filmmaker, and I think in that respect, to investigate and try and dig into the reasons why Hollywood is as it is, the reason why filmmaking exists in the way it does in America, strike me as something that's very Tarantino-like, and possibly something that will be pretty extraordinary when it arrives.
Yeah, you'll just have to wait and see. You just have to wait and see.
Tarantino's talked a lot about this idea of, I'm going to make 10 movies and then I'm going to quit because every director's last movie is bad. He's obsessed with this idea, and I find it really fascinating because I think Tarantino is somebody like very concerned with their own image and their own legacy, because he talks about the filmography as like a batting score, and he says, well, if you make one bad movie, then that like knocks you down like the cost of 2 good movies. And it's such an unusual way to think about your own work, but I think it's part of that self-branding that made Tarantino like as popular and cemented as he is. So it's an odd one. I think he is just really fixated on the idea of, I need to end on a high.
He knows how to market himself. He always has, and that's very intriguing if that's the truth. Who knows whether he will or not? He's so voracious a filmmaker, I can't imagine him wanting to stop. But at the same time, that is a perfect legacy. That's like a Citizen Kane legacy, isn't it? You make perfection in 10 and walk away. We'll see if he does.
How do you describe a Quentin Tarantino movie? To be Tarantino-esque, I think, is to be at the limit and boundary of most things. Violence, character, dialogue, cause and effect, place, setting, time frame. You're working at the limits and margins, I think, at every single moment. Whether he's making a war film, whether he's making a Western, whether he's making a homage to Grindhouse or to blaxploitation, Tarantino is throwing references at you almost incessantly, all the time. And at the moment, there isn't anybody in contemporary Hollywood who quite looks like Tarantino or quite makes the kind of films that he does.
Okay, fine. So me with my little hand.
You know what? I was
Doing it,
hoping.
which I'm seeing more of the rules than I would with the camera. The idea is for them to step into it. So it's just kind of like sky. Actually, maybe we can figure it out so we can just like point it at sky and maybe the tip of
Your goal is that you're seeking to be original, provocative, independent, of a singular mind in the art that you're creating. Well, Tarantino has achieved all of that in his career.